So hi everyone. So my name's Matt Stait, and I'm here today with Jamie Clubb. So we're talking about the Festival of Martial Arts, which, as we know, is June 30th till July the 2nd. It's going to be down in Somerset. It's going to be a fantastic event. So what we're doing here is we're talking about some of the instructors that are coming to join us and exploring some of the opportunities for you guys to get to meet some great people and get to do some great training. So Jamie, thanks very much for speaking to me today.
Thank you very much, Matt. It's a pleasure to be here.
Fantastic. Well, I'd like to start, if you don't mind, at the beginning with just an overview of who you are and what it is that you do for those that may not be fully familiar with your work.
Sure. Okay. Right. So my background is eclectic, to say the least. Hence the reason why I've chosen a chimera as my symbol. It reflects both the eclecticism and also the chaotic nature of violence, if you like, and it might also be my life too. But yeah, I came from a sort of a vagabond background, as in I came from a very old traveling circus family. It tended to keep me on the move, but also when we ended up rooting ourselves and staying in one place for an extended period of time, it was in the middle of nowhere. So therefore, my martial arts training, I had to travel for it. And because of that traveling, I ended up training in various different places. I'm not going to go for my full background. I did have decent foundation in a couple of different systems, but a good part of my martial arts background has been using critical thinking to get the best training methods down. And this is I took a self-protection route for a long time, and I would say that's probably where I roughly fit. But having said that, I've expanded out from it, so the self-protection is still taught as a very self-contained, very restricted area of my experience, of my training, and I like to keep that nice and small and restricted because I think that's what makes effective self-protection teaching. However, I like to then be able to get students to explore various other different martial arts, so through cross-training. So that's pretty much my approach, and I offer various different services now. I taught a club for well, first of all, I taught kickboxing for about 4.5 to 5 years. I gave that up. Had a bit of a hiatus where I just went back into training. Then I ended up founding my own group, Club Chimera Martial Arts, my own brand, if you like, very much based on the Jeff Thompson principles to begin with. And, pretty much Jeff Thompson and then Mo Teague sort of threw me the ball, and I just ran with it in the direction that I wanted to go, and continue to develop to this day the Club Chimera approach. I'm very careful not to call it a system in a let known style, but it's an approach to teaching. From that, I've been able to formulate various different services. When I gave my club up in 2014, when I closed the doors on that and stopped grading people and started to teach only privately, I was able to get really into what I wanted to do. And what I want to do is to be able to provide tailor-made services for clients. So this can be on a simple one-to-one basis with complete novices, expanding out to being in a teacher consultancy role. So a good portion of my clients now are martial arts teachers. Sometimes they're people who run their own associations, both in this country and abroad. Sometimes they just run a single club, and sometimes they're just martial artists who aren't teachers but have a huge amount of experience. But then at the other end of the scale, I've got people coming to me who've got no background in anything at all. But I like to be able to be service driven. So rather than tell people, come and learn the Club Chimera martial arts style, which doesn't exist, okay, I much rather ask a person, what is it that they want, what is it that they need, okay, and from that, I like to be able to provide a service that I think will best serve them. Again, going back to what I talked about in the early days, critical thinking plays a big role in that. I have my sort of three standards of clarification. What is it that you want? What is it that you need? What is the purpose of your training? What do you want to get out of your training and experience? Critical thinking, or skepticism, if you like, which is having an honest, science-based look at what you're learning, what you're training, and that's a constant reevaluation that none of us are away from, if you know what I mean. I'm constantly updating my material. There's so many things that over time I've discovered that needs updating or needs improving, or even things that need discarding. You know, sometimes you have to decide to yourself whether this is still true now, or whether this whatever you're training is still true now, or whether it's still relevant to what you're doing. So that's my critical thinking. And then finally, individuality. I like to put the individual at the center of what they're doing. So that's very broadly speaking what I offer, but from that we can pull out various different services.
Yeah, thank you. Well, that's a pretty good overview there. I mean, that is one of the questions that I was going to ask, because the way that you teach and the structures that you use is quite unusual, especially in sort of today's modern franchise model world, where sort of stack 'em high, sell 'em cheap kind of deal.
Yes.
You very much seem to work, as you mentioned the word individual, you seem to very much work on that level, and you're doing some really interesting stuff as well outside just the physical, which I think is really interesting. But I'd like to just track back first, if you don't mind, because I think, again, the modern generation of martial artists may not fully appreciate where you sit in the landscape, because you know, I remember many years ago where you were in the scene at the time with the likes of Jeff Thompson, Mo T, things like that. You were actively involved. You had loads of really good DVDs out at the time. I recall I've still got them on my shelf. As you mentioned, an awful lot of writing, an awful lot of exploration, and you were a very sort of important information giver, if you like, during that time. But you seem to have drawn back from that a little bit. But my guess now is that you're giving exactly that kind of information, but you're doing it now to individuals that you work with. So how does that actually look like? If somebody comes to you and wants your knowledge, what is it that you actually offer? You talked about a suite of services. What do you mean?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So yeah, suite of services. So really, from well, the funny thing is that it is as I said, you know, I've got some sort of ready-made rough sort of banners, you know, if you like, where that people can come and train with. So if someone comes to me and says, okay, so if we're talking, you know, normal, average, I say normal, no, it's a normal, but person with no martial arts background or with limited martial arts background, let's say someone comes to me and says, look, you know, I want to learn self-protection. Okay, so number one, you've got to kind of make sure that that's exactly what they want to learn. You know, sometimes people, you know, will want to say, look, I need something that's practical. For example, I've got somebody who's one of my clients is a bodyguard, who's come to me, hasn't got a huge amount of experience in unarmed training. He's got military experience. He works internationally as a bodyguard, but he's done a course on some of the unarmed stuff, and he's not particularly happy with the stuff that he's learned. So he's come to me. He's seen some of my background and my CV, if you like, and I'm working with him. And with him, it would be, okay, this is a self-protection course. You're under no illusions that you know that you know the environment that you're getting into. So that'll be tailor-made for a bodyguard. That's somebody who's voluntarily putting themselves in harm's way, if you like. And we're dealing, and I tailor-make the course for him. Then I might have somebody who comes in and says, look, my kid's getting bullied at school. And I've had some pretty extreme cases where I've had parents come to me and that their child has been targeted physically by bullies. They live in a certain area. You know, they've involved teachers, you know, they've gone through all the correct channels, and it's coming down to a simple case that this kid is getting targeted for whatever reason. And so I've had to go into intensive courses with them. But then I might get somebody who says, I've had the Women's Institute come to me and say, look, you know, most of us are, you know, late middle age and even elderly. You know, we meet together. You know, obviously we're not interested in a very physical course, but we're very interested in self-protection. So I'll do a whole soft skills presentation to them. But I won't, at the same time, I won't be judgmental, because, you know, the attitude's like, okay, well, no one here is going to be able to physically pull anything off. You know, if people are genuinely interested and come forward and say, look, I want to learn something, you know, things go wrong, I make mistakes, you know, how can I best deal with that? I'll say, okay, well, we'll look at physical skills that can work for you. better that environment, and even heaven forbid, introduce some a degree of pressure testing. And I'm sure we can find some way where you can do it against some degree of resistance. So, and I've even, as I said, I've even had that coming off the back of things like the Women's Institute. So I've had that part of it. I've had the Boys Brigade. So again, it's dealing with at-risk youth, if you like. I've also done something similar to that down in Hackney as well. Again, as a sort of an interventionist situation where you're kind of teaching self-protection, but they also want that martial art element in to have an activity thing, get their teeth into, and to continue training. But then I've had a lot of instructors come to me and on a consultancy basis, and they have helped develop new services. So they've come to me and said, okay, well, I want to work on this particular field. We're not very happy with our stand-up fighting. So let's say, for example, you've got a sort of a pragmatic karate club, for example, and they're saying, well, okay, yeah, we love your self-protection stuff. We've done the self-protection stuff. We do a lot of the Jeff Thompson stuff, the Moteague stuff, or any of the the related pragmatic your sort of material map, things like that. I've had practical traditionalists come forward and they said, okay, but now we want to look at sort of going to our attribute training field, and we want to develop our stand-up skills, for example. And so we'll start introducing elements of Muay Thai or Dutch kickboxing or even boxing. And then what tends to happen is that as I teach, and this came particularly out when we were doing the lockdown training with the Zoom, which worked really well for me in many respects, because I was used to being in the middle of nowhere. I was used to going around training in different clubs, some of the best clubs in the country, if not in the world, some of the places I'd trained at. But then I wouldn't have anywhere to go and practice with other people. So a lot of the time I was having to bring that right back to the sticks and have to develop my own training methods to get on. And I was doing that kind of stuff right the way back to when I was about 18, now in my mid 40s. And so having to take that information and then sort of consolidate it back at home and drag in any poor soul who wanted to come and train alongside me, I had to really come up with creative methods, if you like, to dealing with what I had. I didn't have my own gym. I didn't have just had an old barn I had to share, sometimes with animals and sometimes it was being used as a workshop. And so I had to adapt to that kind of environment. So years and years of doing that. When it came to Zoom time, for me it was like, guys, I can run your classes for you. Book me for a class. Because why? Because I've got decades worth of learning how to train in isolation, or with limited numbers of people, or with people who've got limited skills and all the rest. I've got so much background on that, and working in confined spaces, working in really bad health and safety environments, if you know what I mean, learning how to safely be able to train in those environments and get the best out of your training. But as I was doing that, obviously, I was trying to take advantage of the technology we had available, and I'm a bit of a technophobe. I'm not going to pretend that I've got any particularly good technological skills. I mean, it's definitely not. It's not really in my wheelhouse, if you excuse the expression. But I still wanted to take advantage of what we had. So I was going, let's look at the screen sharing. Let's look at actual fights. So when that started coming up, this learn from the fight developed, and where I would be, I'd get an instructor who'd say, such as Mary Stevens from Athena School of Karate would say to me, okay, well, I want to work on individual techniques. We want to really get our hand stuff good. So I'd say, okay, well, let's break it down. Let's do, just from stand up, not worried about self-protection. We just want some decent full contact attribute training, hard skills, just to get everybody's that area good. So we'd have a whole lesson on the jab, and then I'd start, and as I was talking about the jab, I'd start talking about other fighters who are great exponents of that. And a lot of my clients will tell you, when I talk about self-protection, I'll quote criminology. I love history, full stop. But I like, criminal history because I think it has a direct relevance to what we teach. If you're teaching self-protection, people who teach self-protection should have some kind of working knowledge of criminology, or at least criminal history, I think, because otherwise, who are you training to defend yourself against if you don't really understand your enemy? So that's where that crime part of it is. So if you like that sort of learn from the crime, and I fed that into some of my podcasts as well. I'd use examples from criminal history to illustrate aspects of awareness or aspects of soft skill area. But then I'd also, when it came to the attribute training, or even some of the physical skills and everything, I would be saying, well, look at Sonny Liston's jab, look at, Floyd Mayweather's defense, look at Archie Moore's tactical awareness and strategies, look at Joe Lewis's right cross. We'd go through all this kind of thing, and I'd be just dropping these names in, and then I'd go, okay, I should start bringing the footage in. And Mary was saying to me, can we not have lessons hearing more about these guys and how this relates to it? And then I had someone else, Vijay Pathak, from Forest Karate. He came and said, I want you to really expand this into a workout. So when he was sort of in that in-between stage of lockdown, we not only did some sort of training in his living room where we're zooming in, but when he got the class back together and they had very limited content, remember that sort of in-between stage when you could do pad work under limitations and all that sort of thing. So I went, right, let's go full out for Learn for the Fight, get a projector screen in, get me streamed into that classroom. I'll do a screen share so we can watch fight footage, and we can do workouts based on that fight footage, and then put that onto the focus mitts so we can start developing drills on that. So what ended up happening is you have a whole lesson where people were, we did about 2 or 3, I think. It's all recorded on my website, and we would have a whole lesson looking on all the greatest jabbers, right back to the likes of Benny Leonard in the 1910s and 1920s, and up to Sonny Liston, and then Lennox Lewis and up to the present day, Lomachenko, Vasyl Lomachenko, and things like that. So we'd look at these guys, these fighters, and that would inspire our workouts. And then we'd also do things like watch a fight. And this was something I did very early on in lockdown. I was going, watch a fight. And again, I got this from some of the experience that I'd had when I was doing all the cross training. And you watch 2 fighters and you pick one of the fighters. And you click your fingers every time you see an opening in the opponent, the guy who you're fighting against. Yeah, so you pick that, and so that creates that synaptic response. And then after that, you change it into just strike, any strike, doesn't matter when the opening is. So you're just prompting that reaction, and that goes all the way up into shadow boxing. So you end up developing this type of shadow boxing that's based around an actual fight that's going on. And when people are starved for sparring partners or starved for inventive ways to get their shadow boxing going forward, that was really helpful to me. And that was the way I used to tell back when I ran a class, and even before when I was doing my own training, if someone had to stand out in sparring, I would say, right, okay, well, you're going to shadow box. But when you shadow box, I don't want you just walking around just throwing all your favorite techniques and doing that. I want you to watch 2 people fighting, choose which one you're sparring against, and you hit and strike every time you see that opening. So you create that synaptic response. You're actually doing something like that. So that was that part of Learn from the Fight. The other part of Learn from the Fight was, again, the stuff that I was doing with Mary Stevens and other people now are contacting me about, was when we'd look at actual fight history. So we'd learn about the backgrounds of a fighter, how they developed, their analysis on their fights, and what their strengths and weaknesses were in fights. And that was so that became a bit of a history lesson. You could go as one stage to a history lesson, but there was also that emphasis on when we would watch the fight through and do our own sort of commentary, going, what's working here, what's not working here. You could see this, again, that became really popular. I mean, I've been doing that now for almost 2 years. So that's the Learn from the Fight part of it. Other services, of course, and what I tend to be well known for is my When Parents Aren't Around. That's my children's self-protection. And that's still to this day, children's self-protection in martial arts and self-protection full stop, is still a very underlooked, underdeveloped area. I'm quite surprised at how little has gone forward. I'm very happy when I start seeing some good people coming up with some really effective stuff. But I think it's, you've got a lot of fear around how you teach children, what you teach children, when I first started teaching it, I actually started teaching when I very first started opening my club in 2004. Because I understood that children were going to be, a big part of running a class. If I was going to, and I was told this was, I mean, again, I've told this for a million times, but I remember when I first was going into running the sort of a club, and I was advised, and I said, oh yeah, well, I'm going to do children's classes, and straight away, my business advisors went, that's brilliant, that's a great idea, do children's classes, you're going to, that'll be the backbone of your club, you've got to do children's classes. I said, yeah, I'm going to teach them self-defense, and yeah, sure you are, of course you are, yeah, it's one of the things you're offering. And I went, no, I'm teaching them self-protection, as in the stuff that I've learned off the great instructors who I've interviewed for the martial arts magazines I was doing at the time, and now trained under Matty Evans, Tony Summers, Jeff Thompson, Mo Teague, all of that, Peter Constantine, all that kind of thing. I said, I'm taking that information and I'm going to make it child friendly. And they looked at me like, you've just poisoned your club. There is no way that is going to work. You cannot teach kids that stuff. And I was given a million reasons why not to do it. I was sort of really warned off it. I was the first thing I was told, you're going to undermine parents. And I'm going, well, and not when parents are actually coming to me and actually saying that, there's a problem and they want their self-protection. And then I was told, it's just, and they've got this image. And the trouble was, what I was hearing was, in the martial arts world, I see there being roughly there's three tribes. There is the sort of traditional martial artists. Okay, so that's a very, very broad area, right? That's the one that we often think of when someone says martial arts. That's the first thing people think of, the traditional martial arts, and that's a huge, broad scope. I mean, that's everything from what in America they'd call a strip mall club. If you like, your McDojos fall under a lot of that one, right the way to your mega pragmatic Ian Abernethy's, Alan Gibson, traditionalists who are really taking their martial arts back to the root, applying pressure testing, applying critical thinking in that area. So Gavin Mulholland, all that kind of thing. So you've got that huge scope that comes under the rough banner of traditional martial artists, and they're traditionalists. Then you have your modernists, which is the reality-based self-defense world. Okay, and I'll come back to them. And then finally, I see them as you've got your postmodernists, which, again, roughly speaking, that's combat sports. When I say combat sports, I normally mean full contact combat sports, because the other type of combat sports tends to overlap a lot with the traditionalists. But essentially, and I always call them postmodernists, because their attitude is like, well, they're not really training for self-defense, but there is a kind of a story they tell themselves that it doesn't matter, because we train against resistance, we train against other trained fighters, therefore by definition our skills are going to work, and there's a huge amount of attribute from where that is actually true. Okay, but what you tend to find is that a very, very good combat sports, full contact combat sports person works effectively in self-protection because they've already got good switched on, good streetwise skills, good people skills, good. Do you know what I mean? It's not integrated into their particular art, and it sort of makes part of what they do. And in their own mind, they're good at adapting it. Okay, so you kind of have that. So back to our middle guys, the modernists, the reality-based self-defense, which is even though its roots, you could probably trace back to medieval times in terms of civilian methods of self-protection, only really got their real basis sort of in the Victorian times, when it starts to come out in the Bartitsu sort of thing. And then there's some stuff over in France. But then then the 1990s with the likes of Jeff and Tony Blauer and all that sort of thing, that's when it explodes as its own its own area. Do you know what I mean? Its own tribe. So we had what I'd call reality-based self-defense. And I used to think that these guys were the critical thinkers, the mega skeptics. They were the guys who are kind of like my heroes when I was writing the books and everything like that. And don't get me wrong, just like the names who I've dropped, they fall under that category. They still are my heroes. But what happened in their wake is you had this huge sort of, again, a mixture of different people who and a culture that created. And what that culture ended up coming forward with was a type of pornography. That's what I would describe it. It's probably the best way to talk about it, where instead of like teaching people necessarily really efficient skills, like what we were learning at the beginning, like the stuff that Jeff and Peter and a lot of other people were saying, like, this is efficient. It turned into loads of pictures of people biting each other's cheeks and gouging each other's eyes out and doing fish hooks and things where you're going, things that aren't necessarily people stoppers, Matt. Do you know what I mean? It's like, as you know, I mean, when you look at your basic hard skill defense skills, what are you looking at? Things that are going to knock somebody out or knock somebody over or restrain someone, right? That's pretty much your sort of thing. All the other sort of stuff tends to be kind of add-ons, don't they? They're kind of like things that you have those, but you tend to use those to number one, be aware that other people can do it to you. I think that's one of the big points. But also they're the things that they like your buffers, but there's still there's few decent alternatives to a good straight right, a good hook, a good, in terms of putting somebody away, a strangle, things like that. Whereas the other stuff is like, that became part of the identification of the self-protection, the reality-based self-defense. That's why I make sure I use that banner, not for me, but I use that as a description of that sort of tribe. And that became the part of it. And because of that, when I say self-protection for children, no, I'm teaching realistic self-protection for children. That's the image. I think that goes up in the mind of a lot of people in the martial arts community. They see that and they go, "Well, are you going to be teaching kids to, rip each other's eyes out and bite each other's nose off and spit it down their throats and all this sort of thing?" And you're going, no, I'm teaching efficient skills, and that means the soft skills. And you go, "Oh no, but soft skills are so difficult to teach." And you go, "Well, that's our challenge, Isn't that part of the martial arts credence, is the fact that we lean into the discomfort? If we're finding as teachers a challenge to teach certain concepts, what do? Do we then go, okay, let's just go into that nice, as you say, stack it high, sell it cheap kind of attitude? Let's just, let's go for the easy route. Yeah. Little Billy, let's do upward block. Let's do rising block. Let's do, boom in lines. Yeah, I'll be good for self-defense. Why? Because it'll give him confidence. Yeah, but confidence at what? No, it doesn't matter. The confidence will be self-protection. I remember hearing that one. I'm going, no, let's give them proper skills. Okay, if the awareness is boring, okay, then make fun awareness games. Do you know what I mean? It's like, and what about even teaching kids aspects of the law, and you're thinking, well, why would I teach them? That's what's in my When Parents Aren't Around, my next edition, which is, which should be out by the time the festival's there, definitely should be out by then, where I thought, I didn't put anything about the law in the first edition, because for obvious reasons, you're thinking, what's a person, 10-year-old can know about the law? And I'm thinking, well, shouldn't a 10-year-old, if you're learning self-protection, know something about the law, seeing as in England and Wales, you are criminally responsible at the age of 10? So isn't there some kind of obligation and responsibility for me as a self-protection teacher to at least tell them some, in a way that they're going to be able to easily absorb, and it's not going to switch them off, and it's not going to bore them, in order to do that, to say, well, guess what, guys, this is what you can do, this is what you can't do, and have it, and to actually say on a legal point of view, because they'll have already heard stuff about the law anyway, and often a lot of urban, as I'm sure you've had your experience there, Matt, a lot of urban myths about the law and things like that people tell you and things like that. So that became important. So the When Parents Aren't Around. So When Parents Aren't Around, I think is again one of the things that's connected to what I teach, along with Learn from the Fight, cross training as a series of different services. A lot of the attribute training I like to do. I mean, there's a lot of good development skills that I can do with what I call my Vagabond Warriors banner. That's the other part of it, the cross training I do, my Vagabond Warriors, which is the cross training in general, where we can go in and out of going, okay, this is self-protection, this is attribute training. And I've even got a drill where we do both, it's called the switch, where you work on the focus mitts and you go self-defense, sport, self-defense, sport. So, and you change your dynamic, according to that. Because as you know, it's like sport's going to be more give and take, range control, things like that. Yeah. Okay. And self-protection is going to be more my turn, exit. You know what I mean? That kind of thing, So, yeah.
Crikey, there was so much within that.
Yeah.
That number one, I wish this was a longer form podcast in which we could actually talk about some of that, because there's so much of that I'd love to actually talk about in more depth. Obviously, you've got your own podcast and stuff, so anybody listening to this, you could go over and listen to that. I'm sure it's brilliant. So yeah, that's the first thing, is I would love to be able to pick that apart. But we haven't got the time for that today. However, obviously you will be at the festival, so people will have the opportunity to talk to you about these things. Now, the reason that we wanted to sort of have a look at the different types of things that you do is because unusually, instead of an instructor turning up to an event with a lesson plan in mind and with a subject in mind and saying, well, this is what I'm going to do, which is what happens a lot, you're actually coming at it from a different point of view. You're actually basically putting it out to the people that are coming and say, well, what is it that you want to pick my brains about? Is that correct?
That is absolutely correct, Matt. Yeah, exactly. And I find that when I'm offering my services with my podcast, even in the last year, for example, I start putting polls up where I say to people, these are topics I'd like to cover. Tell me which one you want me to cover first, and that kind of thing. So I've done that with my podcast, and it's the same thing I'd like to offer with the festival, because I've got, I mean, that's after all how I work. I don't have a regular club where people have got this complete structured plan where it's planned for everybody and everyone's working to the style or the system, if you like. It's more a case of people coming to me and saying, this is what I need to cover. I need to get fitter, but I want to do something fun, right down to this is self-protection. It's a real, it's a serious issue that I really want to address, to people in the middle going, look, I want to learn a martial art, and the ones that you've got on offer are ones that I'd like to learn. So I like to be a service provider. And then I even like to take sometimes like a broad topic like that and then really chisel down to what exactly is that work that will be best for them, as an individual. Somebody's come to me with injuries, sometimes come to me with injuries or a disability, and I've gone, okay, well, now I've got to tailor make the training towards that person, do you know what I mean, and work it on that point. So anyway, so yeah, absolutely, Matt. I'd like to put it out there, maybe even give a list of different topics, or people who are aware of what I do, maybe they can suggest some stuff. But I've got a broad range of different services. Obviously, I'll have my books and stuff like that, which where got some idea to link stuff on. I mean, When Parents Aren't Around is a book, but it's also a series of courses, and pretty much all my children's self-protection comes under that. Vagabond Warriors is my cross-training approach. So that's I love that because it's just a huge freestyle, if you like, of the stuff that I do, so we can dip in and out of that. I've got I think it would be better to kind of go under those sort of banners than to just specifically say something like one of the martial arts that I teach, because without being too self-deprecative, I'm sure there's other people who specialize within those areas would probably be better suited to do that. They'll be probably teaching that, and I'll probably be there training under them on the day and joining in. So I'd rather look at my sort of broader ranges, such as Vagabond, I say broader but specialized for me, such as Vagabond Warriors, which is martial arts cross training. You could look at my self-protection approach, my general one. Learn from the fight. I mean, I know you and I have had some discussions about that in the past, and how many different things can be offered there. Maybe even even now, I say on your advice, I'm looking at creating maybe a membership program where people can do some of the learn from the fight stuff. But yeah, there's a learn from the crime, if you like, as well. That's again built into the self-protection. So yes, a wide range of services, and please tell me which one you'd like me to be teaching.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, what I'd like, as you know, we're looking to do physical sessions and workshops and talks as well. Now, in an ideal world, what I'd like is to be able to get you to do at least one of each. It would be great for you to do a presentation as well. Obviously, we've heard you talking today. You bring up some great points. So I know that a presentation or a talk or a workshop would be a fantastic addition for all of us there. So if we could get you to do both, that'd be amazing. I think probably the best way forward is for people to just stick some ideas onto the Facebook group, onto the event page itself, on our walls and things and our social media, and start sort of gathering some suggestions on that. Really, I think it's probably the best way forward. The other thing I wanted to say just before we wrap up, because I know I've taken quite a bit of your time already, and that is that when we first spoke about this, you mentioned that you weren't really doing events as such. You hadn't done any for quite some time, and it wasn't something that you sort of actively participated in with the event scene as such. Yet you're joining us for this one. So I'm just curious as to why.
Well, Matt, yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, I think the last event I might have done like this probably is about 2012, so about 10 years ago at the time of recording this. It was probably the last time I attended any sort of event like this where lots of martial artists came together. I got disillusioned with a lot of it, to be honest. I mean, I had the opportunity to promote my DVDs in the middle of it. When I very first went to martial arts events, I went in as a punter. I went in completely as a martial artist, not as a teacher. I went straight in, and to me it was just like, I mean, to be honest with you, the first time I went there, it was back in the days when I was connected to professional wrestling, so there was a promotional part of it. But the next time I went, it was in my sort of hiatus period, if you like, between when I was a kickboxing instructor and when I created CCMA. And I went just prior to doing CCMA, and I had a great time because I just went there as a punter and I just joined in with all the free training sessions. Do you know what I mean? So I just joined in with all the free training sessions. I did loads of cross training and I had a wonderful time. And then after that, I went in as a teacher, and I went in there to promote my material and things like that. And I got fed up of seeing the tribalism that was so evident. You know, you'd have people who go there, they've got an opportunity to train with all these different people to completely open their minds. And to be fair, you know, you talk about the DVDs that I did, and back when I was promoting that, one of the best parts of doing those DVDs was the second documentary I filmed. We filmed it at a club, and it was all very self-contained, and you'd have the instructors teaching. So I had about I think there's quite a few instructors. I think it's about 8 instructors on the second one, but 5 of those were being filmed live as part of a seminar thing. And one of the most wonderful things I saw there was the way that these other instructors were training with the other instructors. So one instructor would be teaching, and I'd see Matty Evans and Alan Gibson drilling together with Chris Rowan teaching, and it was just wonderful. Just like, you know, so you've got the Wing Chun guy, you got the hardcore self protection guy, and an MMA, and then you've got ultra traditionalist Chris Rowan teaching the session. And I thought, wow, if this is not what it's all about, then I don't know what is. Do you know what I mean? And that was a wonderful sort of thing of it. But but I saw less and less of that when I was actually going to these martial arts exhibitions. And I just got fed up of people asking me about Bruce Lee. and all this kind of thing, and wanting to try out a new technique and all, and it's just got I honestly got disillusioned with it all. And it's probably got something to do with my people skills, to be honest. I mean, the fault's probably with me. I mean, there's a lot of people who thrive in that environment, but I don't run a club. I don't sell equipment. I don't sell memberships. I don't work within that kind of community. So I don't know where I fit in. And what I was finding, and the last time I noticed this was when I was part of the Disneyland Paris ill-fated tour, if you like. I remember turning up and people being, you know, sat around the table, and I was looking at all these great instructors, and I was amongst them, and everyone was doing an icebreaker, and it came to me, and I said something along the lines of, "Hello, I'm Jamie Clubb, and I have no idea why I'm here, but I love the rides, I love the free pass to the park and all the rest of it." And I never really understood why I fitted in, and I think it was because I was a bit of a networker, and that I'd only become a networker by default because I like writing, but I was never a particular, because I'm not a networking kind of person. So it all became kind of like that. So when your festival turned up, and I'd had invitations from other people, some people very kindly invited me to different things, and you know, and I, you know, and I answered, said no, I don't, and actually my answer was that I don't know where I fit in all this, you know, to be completely honest. And they went, okay, cool, Jamie, no problem at all. And I thought, you know, I'm not going to say it publicly. I'm just going to say, I'm not going to name what they were. And then I saw your festival thing come up, and I thought, yeah, there's something different here. You're actually trying to break the mold. You're trying to create something else, you know, not in competition, because I think because you're in connection with people who put on these more exhibition hall kind of events and award stuff. So you are working with those people. So, you know, and you know, and you've got connections to that as well, Matt. So so I understood that, but it was different. It was like an opportunity to kind of, be in a festival. It seemed to be a lot more, an opportunity to give different things a chance. And I thought, well, if there ever was a place where I might have an opportunity to sort of to promote the stuff that I teach, it would be that kind of place. And I looked at it a few times, and then I got the message from you, and I had a good think about it, because I didn't answer you straight away. And I went, and I talked to the wife and all the rest of it, and it went, you know what, this could be it. This actually is the one with it. So I've got a lot of faith in what you're doing and what I can see there. I can't completely put my finger on exactly why, but I suppose when you're selling it like it's Glastonbury meets martial arts, to me, it just comes to be like, okay, this is a more sort of, because I don't want to put down the others, you see. I mean, as I told you, I got disillusioned with them, but I think that's me getting disillusioned. I think it works brilliantly for other people, and it's obviously very effective for other people in the martial arts world. But for an instructor, that's me as a personal trainer that just teaches seminars and produces content like books and courses. This feels like a better fit. It feels like a far more sort of free flow, free thinking environment.
Yeah, no, thank you. And that's hopefully what we're trying to achieve. So yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's a place for all the different events, and they're all great at what they do, and absolutely. But what we're looking for is kind of what you said, a more sort of free spirited kind of thing, somewhere where people can actually sort of come together and explore the differences and things. And and I've got this huge bugbear. I'm just going to say this quickly before we wrap up. I've got this huge bugbear of exactly as you mentioned, instructors going to an event, teaching their thing, and then not involving themselves in anybody else's sessions. I tend to think that it's a great opportunity to learn from other people. It's a great opportunity to be around other knowledge, and it's a great opportunity to actually look at what you think you know and compare that to what others know. And all of those things are the main reasons for doing this, because if we can do that while having a great time with great people, then it's been a success. And that's the intention for this. So no, I genuinely appreciate you coming on board, and I appreciate that you thought that this is a worthwhile endeavor, which you'll be a great addition to. So for those that are listening, then just to recap on this, what Jamie's looking to do is to put on hopefully a physical session and a talk at least, and that the content of that is going to be down to you guys. So you get to choose. So let us know what you think. Let us know some of your ideas, and we'll take it from there. So Jamie, thanks ever so much for coming on and having a chat with me today. Do you have anything else to add before we wrap up?
No, that's great, Matt. No. Thank you very much. I mean, again, if people want to keep up to date with the stuff I do, clubchimera.com is the place to go. It's my hub for all the links to social media, my regular blog, and where I write up every lesson I teach, so you can always see the sort of stuff that I provide. And there's so much content on that website for you to look at to get an idea of the sort of things I do, and there's obviously the regular podcast as well. But yeah, they're clubchimera.com.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, my friend. And we're looking forward to seeing you on the day.
Thank you very much, Matt.